My name is Jen Kraljevich. I'm the product manager for Research Lab Methods Management. In the scientific data management product line, I sit in the science and research domain of Roche Informatics. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about how we do our Agile approach to validated delivery. I support the Signals E3 in a GXP environment for all of Roche Diagnostics and some of the other Roche business areas as well. Just to give you a little overview of what I'm going to be talking about, I'll kind of do a brief history of how we expanded Signals into Roche, kind of go over the challenges that we found delivering in a GXP environment, and then kind of tell you a little bit about how we have conquered some of these challenges with validated delivery and Agile, which naturally don't always go together. So to start out with, the implementation of Signals Notebook E3 at Roche started with a pilot group in Pennsburg of about 60 folks in chemistry. And I joined in 2020 as they went more toward a product management delivery model. So we picked this pilot up and we looked at the user base that we had to convert to Signals E3. We had about roughly 1,000 folks who were coming from a paper notebook environment, and we had initially about 500 folks that we knew were coming from a legacy ELN solution. So for the first couple of years, which 2020, 2021, we had a heavy onboarding schedule, really just trying to get everyone onto an MVP so that we could really start building the solution out. So we had actually a wildly successful MVP launch. It went super well, and we ended up with many more customers than we had originally intended. So as the user base grew in 2022, we started really concentrating on feature expansion and also integrations with some of the other systems within Roche. And by 2023, we have over 3,100 users now, not only representing all of diagnostics R&D, but we're starting to support groups around that, like manufacturing support and QE and a few others that I will talk about in a little bit. So this is how we got there. It's a fully global, fully validated GXP system. So supporting a heterogeneous landscape, this was the first challenge that we ran into. Was there was quite a lot of resistance to the idea that we could get all of these folks on one instance. And I'm just kind of giving you a rough idea of kind of the way that these groups are put together. They're quite different. I mean, when you get from core lab to molecular PCR, the workflows are quite different. But we really had to convince the customer base, not only could we support within the solution, which is actually quite flexible at the end of the day, we could support all these different workflows, but that in our delivery model, we would be able to respond quickly to features or requests or things that they wanted. Because when you say validated in the same sentence as delivery, historically, that has not been the quickest process. So we really had kind of an uphill battle to really convince everyone to join us on this one instance. So one way that we did this is we worked with diagnostic standards and interoperability in the Roche Diagnostics systems. This is a group that is really responsible for setting the standard for all of R&D and RDS. And we have a great relationship with them. It's very eye to eye. We plan together, we co-create. I mean, all those kind of words that you kind of sound like they're not going to work, but we really do have this relationship with our business customer. In some of the other areas that are not covered by DSI, you can see in pharma technical development, we have some representatives there that we bring into the same model of this planning and co-creation of the roadmap and of delivery. And with pharma R&D and genetic R&D, these are quite early in our relationship with them. Earlier this year, Roche Informatics has expanded our reach beyond diagnostics R&D into pharma and genetics. So with them, we're kind of trying to follow the same model of really helping them get on the solution and solve their problems, and creating that trust of delivery and making sure that these groups have what they need and they don't feel like they're waiting in line behind a whole bunch of other folks to get their needs met. So validation in and of itself, how do we ensure validation, a validated platform while maintaining a regular release cycle? Initially, I think this was quite frightening for people to think about, because when you think about a validated environment that you have regular updates to say, hey, it's inescapable. Revity is going to update us 3 times a year on the E3 system. This did kind of initially make people a little uncomfortable. Like, what if we don't want it? Can we refuse it? So we really had to work through that fear and find a way to address the concerns that the groups and the customers had over this inescapable, you're going to update 3 times a year, whether you like it or not. Also, with access management to validated environments, there is a role-based access model. You need the training to be compliant. We had to account for the fact that if something new comes in on a release, that there has to be training for, that we can respond to that quickly enough. And then also just matching that sort of standard CSV process, like that V model that we were used to in the project mode, matching that to an agile delivery, making sure that we still have all our paperwork compliance and the team is still able to be agile within that delivery. These were the challenges that we faced initially. I'm going to run through like a couple ways that we overcame this. One of the most important things that I think contributes to our success is that we have built-in quality and validation. And what does that mean? That means that quality and validation are sitting in the team with us. Our validation leads are very close to us. And we are always checking in with quality because we want to know before we have a problem. We don't want to do a whole bunch of work and then take it and say, hey, how does this look to you, validation? We want them coming along with us. So this also includes a risk-based approach to testing. That means we don't have to test everything, because a lot of things aren't going to have any sort of GXP impact. So when we go through the releases, and I'll kind of show you in a little bit how we do that, we flag certain stories as, yes, it needs testing. No, it can be informal testing. And that way we minimize that activity of testing and regression testing before a release. We have an in-house tool for product management that is itself validated and the process is validated. And this allows us to kind of do that agile delivery while creating the traceability and creating all the compliant documentation as we go. And we sort of have this self-contained world of not only like the product strategy and all the documentation that you would normally have with a validated system, but also allows us to have an agile delivery with user stories and releases in the whole 9 yards. So that was also a huge win for us. I'm going to address the incremental platform release assessment process that we have, and also just a nod to the modular training concept, which really makes a huge difference when you are releasing new features that folks need to be trained on. You can quickly get those modules in place. So just to tell you kind of how we have our environment set up, which also helps the way that we deliver. With the E3, as you know, your Signals Notebook standard, your dev environment is Signals Notebook standard. So this is where we really get to play around with maybe integrations that we're doing with some other systems in Roche. This is where we, get to fiddle around with our configuration and explore those new features that are going to come to E3 in 3 to 6 months, but we have them today in dev. So we use dev pretty much as dev, but we keep really strictly just the technical team in there. So for the rest of the E3, your stage and your prod, it's pretty straightforward. One difference is from the beginning, we keep our stage environment strictly controlled. It is always in a validated state. And so that means we're release ready at all times. To do that, you kind of have to sacrifice some of the work that you would normally do in stage. I mean, sometimes people think of stage traditionally as like a little bit of a playground. We do not do that. No one is allowed in my stage environment except my technical team and my testing team. And so that way, if I needed to have a business configuration release, or there was something that I had to do right away, stage is ready, locked and loaded. It's always validated. So we have another stage environment, and we call that our train environment. And that's where we do have training there, and the power users maintain accounts there so that they can kind of look at some of those features that are coming into prod, because they're going to go into train at the same time they go into pre-release. So that gives them a little bit of a playground to do that for our power users, so they get ready for what they're going to tell their users. We do onboarding trials there. We do POCs. We have an intern program. Train is kind of a place where we do a lot of the activities that allow us to really get people comfortable with the solution before they bring them on too. And also we keep integrations to lower environments and other digital lab solutions, so that folks really will get a sense of like how do some of these integrations to some of our other data sources or other applications work. Now, I'm going to just point out here that I have one more thing on my wish list. I think I'm actually going to get a second sandbox, and this is very doable. And it's not, prohibitive financially speaking either. But I think I'm going to do another sandbox, because the POC and the demo work is really we're starting to collide. I mean, train is getting a little messy, and I do really want train to have that same configuration as prod. So I think part of the growth of our system and the way that we are growing as a team and a delivery team and an agile release train, I'm thinking of maybe peeling off the POC and demo work to another environment. Okay, moving on. So delivery cadence. We have a modified safe agile release train. And I know like all those words together, make me a bit queasy as well, but because there was a lot of adjectives. But it's because you always have to kind of modify. You always have to modify safe. I worked as a consultant for many, many years. It's very difficult to kind of do these very strict delivery models, especially when you're not doing software and you're doing kind of this in-between work. So we only have 3 product increments per year. And I'm trying to kind of illustrate that here in the example calendar. Why do we have 3 instead of 4? This was a big topic of conversation. First of all, a lot of the environment was not, frankly, used to working even in Agile, let alone product increments. 4 just seemed overwhelming to the teams, and especially across business. But also, when you do these global solutions and you have folks who really need to show up from every continent, good luck finding a sweet spot for planning. It just really is simply not possible. So we figured, my mantra is I would rather be dependable above all other things. So do what we say we're going to do. So having 3 gives us a chance to still bring lots of features in, and it also gives us a chance to actually get people to show up for planning. So we have something called strategic planning. Early on, we peeled this off from your traditional PI planning. I think a lot of how we're organized was heavily influenced by the fact that we started doing this during COVID, like everyone else. It was when the product launched, was in the middle of 2020. So we had no choice but to do things remotely. So I think we sort of came up with a way of doing things that sort of reflected this limitation of travel, and like how we really had to figure out how to get everyone globally on board with something. So strategic planning is where the PMs and the architects get together with business POs, and we really talk about what's happening in the PI coming up and the one after that. And we try to do that like between, I would say, 4 to 6 weeks before we do the proper PI planning with the IT group. And the reason why is because we want people to have a little bit of time to chew on it while they're also doing other things. And so, again, because of this COVID cadence, we kind of fell into this pattern of doing strategic planning early enough to where the PI planning was not so jarring to the teams. Having 3 releases a year also, 3 product increments a year also helps us, because then one E3 platform release kind of fits neatly into each of those. And with each platform release, we have that release that we bring in, and then fast on the heels of that, at the end of each increment, we'll have usually a business configuration release that takes into account any new features that we got, and also any new integrations that we're doing, if we're standing up new business units, et cetera, et cetera. And the business configuration release is really the things that we are releasing as new. It doesn't include like standard changes that we do through ServiceNow, which we, add a group, add an attribute, blah, blah, blah. And then finally, the increment demo, which is our showcase event, is not just what is within the Signals E3, but it's also the whole digital lab art. So we really start to show the customer the workflows, the end-to-end workflows that they may experience a lot through Signals Notebook, but are actually pretty well supported by a lot of the other teams in the digital lab art. And this is going to be just, I'm a big fan of changing teams a lot, and sometimes my teams don't like me for this, but the reason I like to do it is because you're kind of in a different mode all the time, and if you don't change, you may not be well suited to the work that's coming. So we started out with just a focused MVP team, and everybody was on the same team. And as we started doing like massive onboarding, we split into US EU onboarding support, because that was just really necessary. We had tons of groups coming on, and the release we kept very minimal. We really just took what we had to, and we did any features that we didn't have to take, we kind of put off for a little while, because we really wanted to focus on getting as many people on that MVP as possible before we made too many decisions about additional features. So by 2022, that's when we began to focus on features, and we were working across product lines. So not just mine, research lab method management, but also lab data management, lab automation, some of the other product lines that really kind of feed into what Signals is supporting. So we began that collaboration, and people joined the Agile release train, as it were. So now we have a fully functional, very close to splitting into a couple release trains, but what we call the digital lab Agile release train. And so now I have two teams. Basically, one is my Signals E3 team, and they focus on the platform release and also that business configuration. And then I have a group that is really doing a lot of things like data migration from legacy ELNs. Like, we've really kind of leaned into ELN Archive as a solution that we're quite happy with and really helps boost adoption. And also POCs. We are playing with Inventive Vitro Vivo, and how this works in with the rest of our environment. And we have a Cytera POC coming up. So there's one team that kind of chews through that. And the rest of these blue teams are, I'm calling them capability teams, but these are the other teams from the other product lines. And we all work together in this Agile release train to follow that schedule that I had just shown you. So this is the our E3 platform release assessment process. And this was the way that we not only calmed ourselves down, but also calmed down the customer and the whole team, is how are we going to take in these platform releases when, we have to keep everything validated and we have to test everything, and, oh my. So the whole process starts with just staying really tight with writing on their roadmap and understanding what's coming 6 months out, 9 months out, for not what's coming out in the E3 release, but what is the next things that they're going to have in the standard edition. So because those new features will come in your dev, because that's your standard edition. So we just kind of want to know what's coming, because we want to start working through our pretty varied group of customers to get some use cases and get some interest in things that are coming. A good example of that would be parallel experiments. Not everybody's going to use that. So if it's something that we see, oh, this is coming, let's go scare up some folks who are interested in this, who can help us with the user stories and help us test. So we'll start planning that out as soon as we know these features are coming. We monitor the standard release notes. We plug them into a G sheet. We organize them for ourselves. And the first thing that we do is the BAs and some of them are very quite topically. They are subject matter experts of maybe inventory or maybe just the admin console, et cetera, et cetera. The BAs will go through and take a look at the initial details. What is the feature coming in? What is the enablement type? And this is really important. Can we turn this? Does it have to be on? Is it something we can toggle? Is it something that's access-based? This helps us figure out the things that we absolutely have to bring into on that platform release. We will also go over impact assessment with our business representatives, validation, test lead, OCM. We really want to talk to first business and say, hey, is this going to impact any business processes? No, great, perfect. Is this something that needs a user story? Is it a big enough change that we need to address that capability in a user story so that this can become part of the documentation of what our solution does? Yes, no. If so, do we need to test it? Does it meet that threshold for the test rigor to be active or passive? And then do we think we need training? Does this go in the communication? So all these questions are things that we just this is the daily churn of this team. As soon as a new release hits dev, we're populating this spreadsheet and we go to work on it. We leave each other notes. And then what we'll do is eventually, when we prepare for deployment, because of course we know when that pre-release is going to hit our stage environment, we already know what we have to do user stories for. We know what we have to do testing for. So we go ahead and we start getting those ready. Initially, like I said, then we have the my apologies. We have the E3 release, and then we will put whatever we did not bring in. If it was something that we could toggle, we would put that into the backlog. And I'm going to give you an example of that from recent history, which is the plates object has been out for a minute on the E3 release. But since we did not have to take it in, and we still had business quality still had some issues with the way that the audit trail was documented. And so validation and business quality had some chats with Revity, and they made some improvements that are coming out in this November release. So we will be bringing plates into our environment. But it's been in our backlog for a while. And it's just an example of we don't take everything if we're not ready for it, and especially if we don't have to. So when we do these impact assessments for the releases, rule number one, concentrate on what we have to take in, because we're going to have to tackle that. Number two, look at what we could take in and how are we going to address that. And number three, if we're already kind of busy, maybe we have a lot of integrations in that increment, or we have a lot of onboardings and we want to hold off on a feature until we can develop some really good use cases, or maybe we even want to do a POC with it, then we'll throw that into the backlog and we'll keep it on ice for a while. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.